Okay, welcome everybody. Good to see you all again. We're going to get things started as always at 2 minutes past the hour. So get settled in and thank you all very much for being here. We will start very soon.
Good morning, Alex.
Good morning. How you doing?
How are you doing?
Very well. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Thank you. And thank you for your response to my email. Thank you so much for your instructions.
Great. It was helpful.
Yeah, sure.
Excellent.
And
Okay.
I just want to ask if it's possible for you to reach out more to finalize this project with the help of you, if possible.
Yeah, look, I'm always happy to take questions by email. I do my best to answer everyone's emails. Um,
Thank you.
there are times when my capacity is reached, right? And in that case, you can also always find 24/7 the customer support team. But yeah, if I have any availability, I'm always happy to give it to answering emails.
I,
So yeah, feel free.
I truly appreciate it. I truly appreciate it. Thank you.
You're so welcome. All right, so let's begin. I think we're all just about here and ready. So welcome back, everybody. Good to see you all again. This is part two in our Grant Management Academy course. Hopefully, everyone was here with us last week. But if anyone is joining for the first time, welcome. It's good to meet you. The first session was recorded, and everybody who registered should have been sent a copy of that. So if you need me to make sure you get a copy, you can just let me know. But hopefully everyone was able to either join us or watch last week's session. In it, we downloaded a grant management template. I kind of walked through some of the different elements of it, and we started adding customizations and improvements. But in today's session, we have another hour together today. We're going to take that to the next level. We can begin with some questions, like if anything came up during the week or you weren't able to find answers between last Tuesday and today. And then we're going to dive into the existing template and yeah, improve it and customize it even further. I want to show you how we can add more automations. I want to show you how we can improve the finances. I think at the moment the template it's pretty simple. It just has one grant amount column, nothing more to it than that, but it's easy to improve and we can add some more detail to it. I want to show you how you can work with recurring grants. There's a lot of organizations out there who maybe applying to the same grants every year or every week or every 6 months or whatever the cadence may be. And it's not a formality. You do still need to apply, but that's like your fairly predictable funding source. So a lot of that work, if it is repetitive, can be automated, which is very easy to do. I also want to show you how we can actually connect the grant board with a project board. So we can actually allocate the spending that we've got, right? That's why we're raising this money in the first place, showing where we're actually putting that money and what we're actually going to do with it, I think is really important, and something which the template doesn't do on its own, but it's easy to add. And we can also maybe look at some more kind of holistic reporting as well if we have time at the end. At the moment, it's a pretty simple dashboard for the grant management solution where we just basically see stuff coming from that one board. But we could widen that, we could connect our dashboard to other places, and we could see, the whole fundraising picture at our organization if you needed to. And of course, if there are interesting questions and we want to kind of go a little bit deeper into a specific issue, I'm always happy to do that as well. So, as a beginner, um, does anybody have any questions? Anyone have anything that came up during the week or anything they got stuck on that we can begin with today, or should I just return to our solution? Anything at all, folks? All right. I know it's not sometimes that easy to um, we think of questions at the beginning, but maybe I can begin with a very quick kind of recap then of what we did do last week. In fact, let me just check this real quick. No, we're okay. So yeah, what did we do last week? We downloaded this grant management template. It comes from the template center right here. and it comes with these four elements. We also added a form to get to know folks, but these are the four elements we were really looking at, and we mostly focused on the grants pipeline. We added our own grant in here, the Environmental Protection Grant of Summer 2026. We added it to a new grant provider, the Sustainability Foundation. We also were playing around with another one of these columns, but we can remove that. That was just a test. And we looked at, delegating these tasks, improving the automation, uploading files, and so on and so on. But yeah, like I said, we can maybe start off today with a couple of nice little automations, yeah, because I think that will help us get started today. So we've already got 5 automations active on this board already. These are the ones that we've worked on last week or maybe came already in the template. But what we could do, for example, is add here another column. And if I add here a status column, we could call this recurring or recurrence. Just track whether this is a recurring grant or not. And we could then give it the value. So maybe this is a monthly recurring grant, an annual recurring grant, every 2 years. Biannual, it's biannual every 6 months or every 2 years, who knows? We'll call it every 2 years. Something like that. I just changed the colors so that it's not following the traffic light system. And then if, for example, the Environmental Protection Grant of Summer 2026 is a grant that you know pretty likely to want to apply for this again in 2027, you know that it's a grant that comes around once a year, you can write it from the very beginning, put in here that it's an annually recurring grant, okay? And we could then add an automation so that when this grant is marked as submitted, it's going to be duplicated. And we can then add another automation to kind of reset that newly created item and have it revert back up here to our active grants group. And that can just save you adding that again and again and again. So how would we do that? We can say here in the automation center, create automation. And I can say when a status changes to submitted, but only if the recurrence rate is, let's say, annual, then duplicate the item. And we have the option of duplicating it with or without sub-items. Sorry, updates. I don't know why I said sub-items. Updates. And I would recommend probably without updates, because the updates, as far as I see it, are kind of unique to that specific year that you're doing the application, right? So here we have an update about this year's application, right? This is not relevant for the 2027 application. This is an update we added last week about this year's application. And maybe there's a whole lot of communication in here between your team members about this grant. So the newly duplicated grant will be the same as this in every way, but it won't have here the update. What we can then do is add another automation. It's going to say when an item is created, but only if that item is created in the group grant submitted. Okay, moving a grant to that group is not the same as creating an item in that group. And at the moment in our workflow, there's no other way that a grant could be created in this group directly other than that previous automation. So now we're really honing in, if you like, on just grants that are created via that previous automation. And then what we can do is start to clear things out. So I can clear columns. I can clear, for example, the owner, because it may well have a different owner. I can move the item up to the active grants group. I can push the date by 365 days, or even, if you want to be very precise, 12 months, so that it accounts for leap years. And we obviously want to change the status because it's going to be marked as submitted. I want to change it to pending, perhaps. And there's other changes you may well want to make here. You may also want to create sub items, because remember it's going to come with those previous sub items from before. So you may want to add sub items that are different, up to you. So we can say create this automation. And by the way, you'd want to have another one of these for uh, monthly recurring grants and another one for every 2 years. Like you'd have a different one of these automations for each one, and you'd push the date by the corresponding amount. And now what can happen if we say we finished working on this grant, we have submitted it. Let's say we change it to submitted. It should now move into the submitted group. Bingo. It should now duplicate, move back to the top, and reset here the owner and the due date. Let's just check that that worked. We do have one item here for 2026. This one we are going to manually have to just update to 2027. That's unavoidable. I guess it is avoidable, but it's avoidable at a very significant cost of simplicity, right? We could make a lot more sophisticated, AI-powered automation, but this is, I think, a very simple way. All you need to do is change the year manually. That's pretty straightforward. It hasn't pushed the due date. Maybe I just need to refresh the page. See if that worked. Oh yeah, and you will need to also remove these old sub-items. They're no longer relevant. And there's no automation for deleting sub-items. Okay, so why didn't it push the due date or clear the owner? Let me just check that that was built correctly. Push due date by 12 months and set status to pending. I think it's still saying here it's never run, so I think it's probably just still thinking. Let's just leave that to work a little bit, and then we can take another look. But you can see how much time that could save, right? Rather than having to constantly be adding these things each year, and maybe you forget that this is a recurring grant. Maybe you didn't even realize that you could apply again and again. As soon as you find this grant in the first place, if you've got a column like this, you can add that in when you very first discover the grant, and then it'll be reminding you each time. If you wanted to take this even one step further, you could have other status columns here to define the type of grant that it is, and then that could, for example, trigger different sub-items to be created if there's different needs that this grant has. And you can kind of play with that as necessary. All right, so keep an eye on these columns. I hope they are going to clear out on their own. This one should clear and this one should push by a year. So we'll watch to make sure that that actually does work. But it looked like it was set up in the automation correctly. I think we just need to be a little bit patient. So the next thing I would love to show you is how we can maybe take the finances of this to the next level. Because as I said, this is a pretty basic measurement, just grant amount, nothing more. I know that in many cases, grants are a lot more complex than just grant amount. You may receive the money in different chunks. So maybe you were asking for $100,000 and they're going to give you $50,000 on the day that you win the grant, and then 6 months later, the other $50,000. Okay, that's pretty common. Or maybe you request a certain amount, let's say 100,000, and you actually only receive, let's say 80,000. Maybe the Sustainability Foundation liked your proposal, but they also liked someone else's. So they decided to split the available money between you and a secondary organization. So we want to be able to record that kind of stuff somewhere. So let's take that last example. I'm going to add here a new, sorry, not date. I'm going to add here a new number column. And I'm going to call this grant amount awarded rather than just grant amount. I'll rename this to grant amount requested. These are a bit longer so I can see what the names of the columns are. And I'll just move this one to be next door so that they're side by side. Now, you know what? Let's imagine that we did win this grant. It's no longer just submitted. We can move it to awarded. And in the grant amount awarded, there we go. It's moved down into the group correctly. In the grant amount awarded, we can put in here that we were actually awarded, like we said, maybe $80,000 instead. One thing you'll note is that this is a number column. So all it can have in this column are digits. 0 through 9, nothing else. Oh, I guess a decimal point you can add as well. But that's it. If you want to add characters like a $sign, the best way to do that is to use the number column and then to customize the number column. Up here in settings, we can add the characters. It's much better to do it this way rather than what I've seen some people do is add a text column. Right? And then here you could do, USD 80, comma, 000. Okay. That looks at first glance pretty similar, but this is just so much more limited because this column can now no longer be used in sums and formulas and dashboards. So yeah, anytime you're using a number, my advice, keep it as a number column, and then you can just add here the unit before or after. You can type your own if you're using a different currency, um, you can write in anything you want. You can paste in an interesting character. That's not a problem. But yeah, that's the best way to work with numbers. Amazing. Now, if you do something like this, always just keep in the back of your mind where else this might have any unintended consequences. Because here we can say, for example, maybe we did win the full amount for this grant, $50,000, and this grant, maybe we also won slightly less, let's say $15,000. So the correct amount that we actually won is $145,000. That's how much we've won from grants to date. But if we come to our grants dashboard, we are going to see this widget, which is telling us total amount of grants awarded is $175,000, which we know is incorrect. And it's because it's pulling from this column, because in the past, this column was just grant amount. If we return to the widget here, you can also see that it has a filter turned on. So the way that it made sure it was only displaying grants that we'd actually marked as having won them is because there is a filter. You can see here it's colored and has the number 1 on the grants pipeline board saying only add grant amounts if the grant status is awarded. Okay, so that's how it got to $175,000. But we've now changed the meaning of that column. So if you are going to make changes to the template, which by the way is encouraged, it's very good, you'll need to just keep in mind if it's going to have any unintended consequences somewhere else. Think where else this board is connected. Dashboards are a classic. So you can see when I clicked on the little gear wheel, it opened up the settings. And the way that a number column works is you can choose either to take account of the items on the specific board. In this case, it would be 3. The dollar is a bit confusing here because it is no longer the dollar. It's just 3 grants have been awarded, which is not particularly interesting. Maybe you also want to track that somewhere. But probably more valuable is going to be to know the dollar amount. So we need to tell it to pull a piece of information from a column to add them up one by one. And instead of grant amount requested, we're just going to check the box next to the column grant amount awarded. So now it's showing us the sum of grants who have a value in the grant amount awarded column. Now, you could argue that this filter here is now no longer necessary, and that's true. If I remove it, it makes no difference. But I actually quite like keeping it there, just because it kind of gives you a bit of security. It's like another level of insurance, because if somebody was to accidentally enter in the amount of the grant here, it's not going to add $100,000 to your grant amount awarded, which I think could be quite serious if you think you've got another $100,000 in the kitty to play with when you actually don't. And if somebody was to just enter that in by mistake, that could happen. But yeah, it's not strictly necessary. You could also, of course, make this column a column that people can't edit or even view at all if you want to. Right, I can come in here to restrict column editing, and I can say, only I or only me and Sarah have the ability to edit this column. Everyone else, it's going to be locked. They can see it, but they can't edit it. So there's a couple of ways you could achieve that. But as that filter is already there, it's not really worth turning it off, in my opinion. Amazing. So that's a good little start, I guess, for the finances. But before we continue, I do see a couple of questions in the chat. So let's just jump down there and see if it works. Cool. I have questions after. Did not have a chance to review. Maybe at the end. It is both. Why can mean one. Okay, cool. So no specific questions there at all just yet. So we can continue. But please do drop questions into the chat if you have any. Amazing. So what I think I would want to see if we want to kind of take this again one step further is what we're actually going to do with this money. That is not the end of the story. Winning $80,000 is great, or earning $80,000, maybe I should say more accurately, because it's a lot of hard work. But we're fundraising so that we can fund a project. That's the whole point. So how do I allocate this $80,000 to whatever the project was that we were working for in the Environmental Protection Grant of summer 2026? So what I'm going to do is add here a new board. And I'm going to create this board using AI, okay? And this is going to be my, what did we actually say we were working on in this grant? Let me remind myself in our letter of intent. It was, okay, a project to save the turtles. Amazing. So let's add a new board. As I said, I'll use AI to build it. This is our Save the Turtles project. Okay, please create for me a project management board for my nonprofit to save the turtles in our local area. Amazing. Let's see what the AI comes up with. Again, we can make changes once it's done, just like last week with the AI that it produced. We're not obliged to use it exactly as it comes out, but it should give us a little bit of something to work with. And what I'm going to do once this board is finished is I'm going to add a connect board column between this board and our grants pipeline. Just as there is a connect board column between the pipeline and the providers, I'm going to add another one to connect these two. Let's actually move these up together so that they are aligned just to keep things organized. Yeah, I think that's the tidiest way of doing it. Cool, so this is the board it's come up with. Okay, it's got tasks completed, in progress, and backlog, a couple of different things, a budget. Okay, it's a nice enough starting point. We're not going to be able to save the turtles with this alone. You're probably going to want to come in and actually put in your specific things. You can also see a few other AI tools running in the background based off these tasks. It's assigning here automatically a priority and a task category, which is pretty cool. The column that I'm really interested in though is this one, the budget column. This is going to show how much we're going to spend on these things. And to make this even clearer, you know what I might do? I may actually just rename this to expenses. So we're actually tracking here the actual amount that's going to be spent. And you may want to add a budget column as well, right? The expected cost and the actual cost. But for now, this I think is enough. So let's add a column here. I can do it in either place. I can add the column in the project, connect it to the pipeline, or I can add it in the grants pipeline to connect it to the project. The reason I can do that is because I'm going to make a two-way connection. I just need to find the other board, check the box next to its name once that's done, and then, as I said, make it a two-way connection. So I will see in both directions that there is a connection. I'll be able to see which tasks are being funded when I look at my grant, and I'll be able to look at the tasks on the project board, and I'll be able to see where that funding is coming from in both directions. So I've made it a two-way connection. I will connect the boards, and it's now asking me if I want to create a mirror column. And mirror columns do often go hand in hand with connect board columns. On this board, I actually think it's not necessary. I'll say I'll do it later, but I'm going to leave that for now. What I'm going to get to see in this connect board column is the name of the grant that's funding this specific task. And I don't really need to know much more than that if I'm the project manager. You know, maybe there could be a case where you also want to know what's the organization who's funding this. Okay, then you would add a mirror column to show that additional information. For now, all I want to know is the name of the grant. Where did the money come from? The grant name. So to kind of allocate this $800 to the specific grant, when I click in here, I see the names of all the grants in my grants pipeline. This is like a little summary of everything we've got going on. And the one I want to pick is obviously this one. And to make that connection, I just check the box next to its name. And now I can see here the name of the grant. I will maybe even rename this connect board column to grant funding this task. So that I can see here the name of the grant that is funding this task. And if it's a simple one-to-one ratio where every single task in this project is funded by one grant, and this one grant, all of its money is going to one project, then it's very straightforward. I can just batch select all the items in this board, up to 500 at a time, and bingo, assign them all to this environmental protection grant of summer 2026. And because we made it a two-way connection, if I return to the grants pipeline board, I'm going to see a new column will have been added. All the way over here on the right-hand side, we see link to Save the Turtles project. Now, what I'd actually recommend is renaming this column to something like tasks being funded. Because at the moment, we've only got this one connected to one project. But probably these other grants are going to be funding other projects. So keep in mind that we can have a connect board column. Think of it like a fork, you know. Here we have the grant pipeline. This connect board column can actually connect to multiple projects simultaneously. If I come to the settings and customize connect board column, you'll see here that I can connect more boards. Maybe I have another project to save the dolphins or another project to clean up the beaches. I could check the box next to each one of these projects and have it all connected in here and only connect the specific items that are relevant to the individual grants. So, like I said, it's a fork. The grant pipeline's at the top, going down to each of these individual projects. So we're doing good so far. Here's my grant in question. You can see the 5 tasks that it's funding. But on this board, I definitely want to know more than just the name of the task. Right? The name of the task is interesting, I suppose. But on this board, I'm managing my grants. And what's important here probably really is the bottom line. We've raised this much money. I want to know how much money we've spent. So this is where I'm going to use a mirror column. I'll click on the plus and I will search here for mirror. When I add a mirror column, the first thing it's going to ask me is with which connect board column should I, it says connect with, but I think affiliate with or affiliate to is maybe more clear because we're talking about so many connections. Connect board column, connect the mirror column. We use the word connect too many times. So the mirror column can't exist on its own. It first needs to be connected or affiliated to another connect board column. And we do have a couple of connect board columns on this board. For example, the grant provider board is going to mean that this mirror column would be able to mirror in information about the funders. Like if we wanted to see the contact phone number on this board, well, that's when we'd use a mirror column. What we want to connect it to is the connect board column called tasks being funded. And then I will choose the field that I want to see in this board. In our case, that field is expenses USD. And where there are more than one item connected, I want to see the summary as a mathematical sum. So now we see how much money we've raised. Sorry, how much money we've raised. And here, how much money we've spent up to date. And I think I've said this already, but I'll repeat it. Anytime you add a connect board column or a mirror column, my advice is that you rename it right away because it can get very confusing otherwise. So this will be something like expenses to date. And what I would say is that maybe it makes the most sense to move this column next to the other number columns. You'll see that there's a little gray line here that matches the gray line in this board, in this column, sorry, so that we know that this mirror column is connected to this connect board column. If you were to add another mirror column for the grant providers board, it would have 2 different, you know what, let's just do it. Let's add another one just so you can see what I mean. If I add a mirror column here and I connect it to the grant providers board, and yeah, maybe we want to see the phone number of the contact person. Here we have it. Just refresh that page. So you can see here, expenses is underlined in green, indicating that it matches with this board underlined in green. the grant provider column underlined in yellow, the phone column also in yellow. So I know that this is mirroring some information from the item in this column. This is mirroring information from the item in this column. That's how connect board and mirror columns will work. Okay, cool. So now we can see a lot more detail with our finances. We've got here the amount that was requested, the amount that was actually awarded, and the amount that we've spent so far, which I guess leads us to the next thing we've probably got to know, which is how much money do we have left? And that's pretty easy. We can add in another column here. And the column I'm going to add here is a formula column. And if anybody has experience working with Excel, I'm sure you'll be familiar with this kind of way of working. If anybody is traumatized from working with Excel with, simple formulas where you put one comma in the wrong place and it all breaks and you can't figure out why, don't panic because we have, again, a nice AI assistant to help build these formulas for you. So you don't have to be either a genius or be able to, troubleshoot your columns. You can just write in here what you want to have happen. Now, our formula is very simple. I just want to subtract one bit of information from the other, but we can still use AI to build it just for the fun of it. So I want to know how much money is left from what I want to know how much money is left. Let's see if I can understand that. Okay, perfect. Grant amount awarded, that's the name of the column, minus the expenses to date. Absolutely perfect. Let's set that formula. And again, just like any other number related column, we're going to add here the character. And just like with the mirror column before, we're going to give it a name, grant amount remaining. All right. Now we're getting some really detailed live financial reporting. Okay. Again, $100,000 is what we asked for. We received 80. We've spent 10.5 to date, and we have 69,500 remaining. Great. So what happens if in our Save the Turtles project, we add in here another task? Okay. Let's imagine that we add in a task called okay. This is what we're going to do. We're going to invent an amazing new turtle saving submarine. It's a super cool project, but these submarines, they do not come cheap. For example, this one is going to cost us $70,000, we think. And if I connect it to this grant here, look what's going to happen back in our pipeline. We now are in the negative. Okay, we're into minuses from this grant. I want to know that, right? That is very important to know if we've overspent. It may not be the end of the world because you may have other funds coming in. Maybe some donors can help fund this. Maybe other grants can help fund this. But that's important. So there's a couple of ways that we can help make that clear. One simple way, sorry, not here, is here. If you come to these three dots, you have conditional coloring. And what I like to do in these cases is color bright red either the cell or the whole row when the grant amount remaining column is less than 0. Ugh, sorry, less than 0. Now you can see this grant is highlighted in red. Now you might think it would be nice to have a automation, if you go into the negatives, remind me. The only problem with that is that we cannot have a number from a formula column trigger an automation in that way. So I think this is a pretty good alternative. If you're working in this board all the time, you'll notice a big bright red thing here. You can save this to your view, so it's going to stick around forever. To have an automation based off this, you'd need to add in a couple of extra apps and that kind of thing to take the information from a formula column and cast it somewhere else. So I think this is a pretty good kind of middle ground for now. And then I guess the question remains like, what would you do? And what we could consider doing would be, well, first, of course, reducing the cost of some of the tasks here. Maybe we could cut off a couple of grand here. Maybe we could reduce this to $50,000. But if you're going to build a turtle submarine, it's got to come from somewhere. Maybe these other grants could also be used to pay for that instead, or as well. So maybe instead of the invent the turtle saving submarine being funded by this grant, instead we could have it being funded by grant name 3 and grant name 4. Okay, so these two grants are funding this. So if I'm the person working on the Save the Turtles project and I need to know the source of my income, I can see that at a glance here, very clear. And if I'm the person managing the grants, grant name 3, grant name 4, I can see here what's going on with the money. Now, this one shows me that we've now got grant name 4 in the red, and this one has gone into the positive. So, you can balance out your books as you need. And yeah, okay, I've now realized something else. Because we've allocated both of these to the submarine project, it's taken actually the full amount from each grant. So if we were going to manage things this way, we would need to have two tasks and split the cost. So this is grant name 3 and this is grant name 4, which is probably not the most elegant way of doing it. And I think you're unlikely to have a task like that. Invent a submarine with this huge individual cost. Probably you'd want to break that down and have parts, construction, R&D, testing, and then that could really come from different grants. And actually, maybe a better example would be something like this. Lawyer consultation with lawyer. Okay, this is a specific consultation with a lawyer, took place on a specific date. We met the lawyer today, and lawyers cost a lot. So that was another $1,000, right? This could then come from a grant, for example, like, let's add a new grant in here that's been awarded, our legal support for nonprofits grant. Okay, so that was a grant that we applied to where lawyers give their support to nonprofits in need of assistance. So we can say that this $1,000, again, this is a very specific task, not like these ones, which are kind of a bit too broad, really, for managing in a project. But this is a specific consultation with the lawyer on this date, it costs $1,000, and that specific task can be funded from a new grant here, which is maybe got $10,000 worth of legal fees that we can call on whenever we need them, right? So that's a nice way of maybe visualizing that more accurately than the kind of more high level values like that. So I hope that's something that you think would actually be helpful, right? Being able to see where the money's gone, seeing here on the project level where the funding's come from. Maybe the project managers are the ones writing thank you notes, so maybe they're going to be able to see where they need to connect the dots. I think that a funder would really appreciate that level of detail. We were able to spend your $1,000 that you gave us for legal fees on this specific project, and you can see that here because we've connected them on very, detailed levels. And I think here on the pipeline, it's going to be very helpful for the overall, grant writers or whoever's managing these grants to see where the money's going. And for reporting, at the end of the day, the environmental protection grant, the Sustainability Foundation is going to want to know where we spent that money. And here we can very clearly tell them, right? These are the exact tasks that we've spent your money on, and we can break it down for them step by step like that. So I hope you like that system. It's something that you think you could actually, replicate and really use in the future. Cool. Couple of questions. So let's return to the chat and see if we can answer all of your questions. Okay, question for the end, but no worries. We can do this now, Claire. How can you pull the imported contacts into the board? For example, we're working with the same grant and contacts. I did make another board, or is that another class? No, we can talk about that here. That's totally fine. So I guess there's two parts to my answer here. There's bringing the information into Monday, and then there's having it display in this connection. So we have them living here in the grant providers board. Okay, so we've connected the boards here using this connect board column. So we can say that the Sustainability Foundation is funding these grants, and then this is where we've put in the names of our funders. So if you've got a big list already, how do you bring it into Monday? Just come to the drop down here and import. As long as that information is in a CSV or Excel file, you just find the hard copy and upload it. And then it's a pretty simple matter of kind of matching your columns. Here it says map columns. You'll just be telling the system, basically, if you've got a column in your spreadsheet called contact person's name, put that into the column on Monday called contact. And you just map the columns that way. And then any data you've already got can display here. And maybe you're not working in Microsoft Excel or in a spreadsheet, you've got some other software. Almost always, if it's your data, you'll be able to export it as a CSV or Excel and then upload it. So that part is pretty straightforward. One thing I might add to that is you might well end up with more than one person that you know at each organization. And the way we've built the template really only naturally allows for one person at each organization. Now, you could, of course, just add more columns here, could add another text column. And this would be like contact person two. And then I can put in, as well as John Smith, we also know Jane Doe. And I can add another phone number and another email and so on and so on. Maybe a sort of more elegant solution if you do have a lot of people that you know at certain organizations would be just to add sub items rather than having them here in the items at all. We could have here the names of the people. So this is John Smith, and maybe we want to change these columns. So we would say, add what we have in the parent. I want to have the phone, email, and probably that's all. And then I could remove these bits of information here, and I'll add John's phone number as a sub item, add John's email in as an email, and then we can track the people that we're working with here. I guess this really depends on two things. As I said earlier, first of all, how many people you work with at the organization. If you're working with one person, you really don't need to go down this path. But if you do have a lot of different people who you are reaching out to a lot, then maybe this is easier. And then, the second part of that is the way you're doing the reaching out. If you need to be able to contact them all individually, one-on-one, because writing a message to John isn't the same as writing a message to Jane, then having it separately would be helpful. But if it's just like a generic contact us page, you need to ask questions about the application, you send it over, then this level of detail is really not necessary. I don't know how good your relationship building is. If you're really building these relationships one-on-one with people at foundations, then maybe the sub-item option is the best. If it is just more of a kind of generic contact, then this is maybe suffice. But yeah, there's a couple of options there. So I went a little bit off topic from your question, Claire, but the answer was to connect the provider to the grant, you would use a connect board column. And if you've got them already in a provider's board, then this is already here. If you need to bring the contacts into Monday at all, then you can import them. If you, by the way, want to connect the grant pipeline board to a different board, maybe you've got a CRM called something else, managed somewhere else, well, then we could come to the grant providers connect board column and in the settings, customize it, and I could connect other boards here as well. Or instead, maybe you don't want to use the grant providers board that we've got for you in the template. That's totally fine. Instead, you could connect it to your pipeline or your CRM of potential foundations that you want to reach out to, and you could connect it there. Totally fine. All righty. is the project board we would track when the reports are due. Okay, cool. Good question. Comes from Jody. Um, I think it depends. It's a bit of a on the fence cop out answer. I think it depends because it it matters to me whether this is an ask of the grant or an ask of the project. If it's something which the grant themselves have requested, okay, so here we have the three tasks that we needed to complete in order to submit this grant. What you could do is add in here further sub items, right? This could also, by the way, be automated. If it's something which comes up again and again and again, we could say, when grant changes to awarded, then add a draft thank you note and prepare first report. Prepare second report. Okay, we're adding these in here manually, but just as we did last week in the automation center, you could automate that, right? We could have something similar to this one that we looked at last week. When an item is created, it generates those three sub items that you see here. We could also generate those three reporting items as well. And if the reporting items are repetitive, it's something which many grants are going to need, then I'd recommend to do that. Of course, you can add in here manually if this specific grant said show submarine development progress. Okay, that's something that they specifically wanted for this specific project because for some reason they don't believe in turtle saving submarines. Then we can come in here and we can set that as a task we need for this specific grant. It doesn't have to only be things that come from the automations. So yeah, I think probably that's the best place to put in the needs for the reports. Having said that, there could be a case for adding them here. When you might want to add them here is if this project is completely sort of standalone. Everything that's coming in here, standalone isn't the right word. If this project is completely contained, right? If every single one of these tasks is being funded by a grant, then yeah, maybe you do add in here the reporting needs because there is no difference in a way between the grant and the project. But I think it's nice to allow yourself that flexibility because like we saw here, maybe you've got this extra grant for legal fees, and it makes sense that this grant could fund this task because this isn't something which you can spend anywhere else. It also allows you to free up, your general expenses funds. Sometimes when you win money from good donors or something, it has to go to a certain project or it has to go to a certain type of expense. So if it's got these conditions, you want to spend it on those specific things. And if there's a grant which is funding most of a project, but there are some tasks you can kind of pull out of that project and have that funding come from somewhere else, that's a good thing to be able to do. So I think it is a good idea to have a separate board for the project and a separate board for the grant. And I guess ultimately it doesn't really matter where you put the reporting needs, but I would say generally, to me, it makes more sense to have them in the grants pipeline because that is something that comes with the grant. And that's something they've asked for. You're not going to build a plan where you've added in a report just for the sake of it. You're only going to produce that report if the grant person has asked for it. But it could theoretically go either way. It's not something which I'd say is super critical, but it's a really good question, and I like the way you're thinking about that already. Um, okay, cool. Last week, another question. Last week I had out my template for the grants pipeline on my name board, but now I see we are in CRM. Can I move it back over to CRM? So maybe there's a terminology thing I need to make clear. CRM is, first of all, the name of a product. So we are using now Monday CRM, and you can also switch between the other products. So you can switch over to Monday Work Management and you can work there. By the way, you may well want to have your project for saving the turtles. That maybe actually makes more sense to move this to Monday Work Management. It's the best place to manage tasks, projects, those kinds of things. You can do that with a click of a button. And The connections will remain, any automations will remain. It's not a problem. In fact, let's do it. You can move it to a different workspace. For example, the demonstration workspace. It's disappeared from here, but it is over there in my other board. It's still there in my work management account, and those connections still exist. Here's my work management account. And if I come back to the CRM, apologize, it has closed my browser, which it does tend to do from time to time when I'm opening pop-ups. Apologize about that. Let's just share the screen again. Definitely again. This isn't a Monday problem. I promise this is just something with my Google browser. Oh, this is driving me crazy. Sorry, folks. Why won't it let me do it? See if I can just do it a different way. Okay, great. I've got them now. So I'll share my screen again. Cool. So here's the CRM product where you can see our CRM related stuff, managing the people of the grant, managing the donors. And here's my project management board where I'm managing my weekly tasks and my Save the Turtles project. They're still connected. It's not a problem to have them across the products. All I did to move them again, click on the three dots, move to, and you can move it to a different product. You may also, though, Claire, have a workspace or a folder called CRM. Like when you first open a CRM, it usually comes with a workspace within the CRM product called CRM. And the CRM is kind of the basic one that they've built with all the pre-ordered stuff for managing it as a sales CRM. But you can move things between very easily. You can see I've downloaded it a few times, so I have a couple of them. You can move things between them, whether it's a product or a folder or a workspace, you can do that just with the same button. Move to workspace, folder, or product. It really makes no difference. If you've actually disconnected them, that's maybe a bit more, I don't want to say serious because nothing's impossible, but that would then mean you need to come to the connect board column over here. And then again, you can choose what it's connected to. But if it's just something that you've dragged to the wrong place by mistake, yeah, you can always bring it back just like we saw before. Um, cool. Okay. Marcos, is there a way to connect budget tracking tools to Monday grant management software? So, in one word, yes. Yes, of course. You could build your own budget tracking tool in Monday. You can use AI to help you with that. You can check out the template center for budget tracking tools. And then again, use the connect board column. In a way, what are we doing in our Save the Turtles project here? It's not a very sophisticated tool for managing the budget, but we do have the column here. If we added more columns for expected expenses and actual expenses, we're starting to build sophistication, and we've connected those columns together. So that's one way of doing it. But if there was another tool that you want to use, like an external piece of software, you may also be able to connect that as well. Monday integrates with lots of different software. If I come here to more integrations, you can see them all. We have an open API. So these are the software solutions that Monday's already built integrations with, but also independent developers can also build their own apps to connect Monday. So, you're welcome to explore the app marketplace and see if there's an external budget management tool that you like to work with that you want to connect it to. I'm sure there are many. I mean, you could argue something like QuickBooks could be used, right? And there's connections that are provided here that can connect them. So yeah, I don't know what specifically you're looking to use, but the general answer is yes. Whether it's in Monday or without, things can be connected. So we can talk specifics if you have something else you really want to look at, but it's possible. Deanna, asks, can you provide best practice on how and what workspaces to set up? And is there a way to get rid of a workspace that I'm not using? Yeah, sure. So there's no limit to how many workspaces you can have. You can have as many of them as you want. Um, so you're pretty free with how you use a workspace. The workspace is your sort of top level, sort of highest tier of organization within Monday. So I recommend you kind of map that to the way your organization is divided as well. If there's different departments within your organization, or yeah, whatever the high level breakdown of your organization, you can put that into the high level breakdown of your workspaces. You can always come to the three dots here and browse all workspaces. You can see everything that you've got. Um, don't do what I do. This is my demo account. It's a real mess. I've got, workspaces with the same name and stuff. It's not a good way to work. But you can now see what's going on. And yeah, you can easily delete these. You can move stuff between them. So my advice overall actually is don't think too much about it. Don't worry too much about it anyway, because you can always make changes. You can undo things. Um, Maybe one other point to add is that you can change here things about who can see things in workspaces. So workspaces can also be a convenient tool for controlling permissions and that kind of thing. So if you've got a lot of boards which are going to have the same people looking at them, you can put them all into one workspace, and then yeah, you can control who's got the ability to work within that. So that may be one other element to consider. But again, generally speaking, I'd say don't worry too much about it. Things can move between them quite easily. You can always connect things between workspaces, and yeah, make changes to decisions you made in the past. Okay, one more question, and then we're going to have to probably start wrapping things up. It's a good question from Leslie. I thought CRM was free for nonprofits, but now I see it's only 70% off. CRM, as with all of our products, you can see the four products here, have the same deal for nonprofits. 10 seats for free, and then 70% off, extra seats beyond that. So you in fact get 10 free seats on each of these products, and they could theoretically be different people. So, you could have, like, if you've got 10 staff members who only work on projects and 10 staff members who only work nurturing your donors and reaching out to your grant providers, you could have 20 people working for free. They could be 10 different people in each product. You need to buy extra seats, then you get the 70% discount. That's where that comes in. But yes, you do on the nonprofit program have 10 free seats on each of these. So I can confirm CRM is free for nonprofits as long as you don't go over the 10 seat threshold. Okay, maybe I will do one more question. How do you delete a workspace? Here is the workspace I'm in right now, the demonstration workspace. Just clicked on the three dots, delete workspace. That's simple. Okay, my friends, we've got like 2 minutes left, and there was one more thing I wanted to show you, and that was just how we can maybe boost what we're seeing here in our dashboard, because I like the dashboards a lot, but the dashboard that comes in the template is super simple. I mean, that is deliberate. It's only connected to one board, and it's connected to the grants pipeline. And that's maybe enough if all you need to understand about what's going on with your grants is a few insights from that board. But the beauty of the dashboard is that it can connect to multiple sources. So if we wanted to change the meaning of this dashboard to a fundraising dashboard, we may also want to connect it to, for example, a donations board. I don't want to add this automatically to all my existing widgets. If we do that, it's going to take the amount of money from the donations and just add it to this widget here automatically. So I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to add a separate widget, a number widget, for example, where I'm also going to track how much money we've raised from donations. I'll come to the three dots in settings to see how it's got to this number. I honestly don't even know what this number is. But if we look over here on the right, we can see, okay, it's taking the number column from the donation amount on the donations board and the grant amount requested on the grants pipeline. I guess it's just the first one, so that's what they went for. But yeah, here we want to see just this one, I think. So that's the donations received. And again, I will make this prefaced with a dollar sign. So that's quite nice. But maybe we do also want to have one which shows both of those together. So I can duplicate this. And then in the settings, say I want to see both the grant amount and the grant amount rewarded, donation amount and grant amount added together. This is now total funds raised to date. Okay, that's nice. Now we're testing some of the capabilities. You may also want to add a widget to show the amount that you've spent. To do that, you need to connect it to some of the projects that you've used money for. So for example, saving the turtles. Okay, and remember, this is in a different product altogether, but I've added it to the board. And now I can add here a number widget to track the expenses to date. Here I want to see only the expenses column from Save the Turtles. I don't want to see these other ones, so I'll remove those. Right, so that was pretty quick, I confess, but I hope it was enough just to see the possibilities here. Oh, okay, I must have, that was a mistake. Yeah, I did. When I clicked on Save the Turtles, I didn't unselect this. So it's added all the information from Save the Turtles to the existing widget. So it's boosted the numbers, it's put in the tasks here, which this widget should really only be showing the grants. So I maybe made a small mistake there, but hopefully it's enough just to show you that the grants dashboard as it comes in the template is really just scratching the surface. And if you want to build out some more comprehensive reports to see, yeah, how much money you've raised overall and where your funding is coming from and where it's going, you can definitely do that just by adding more dashboards, adding more boards to this dashboard and then adding the widgets to pull out the data as you see fit. But my friends, we have been going for an hour, so I'm afraid to say we're going to have to wrap it up there. I want to be respectful of everyone's time and thank everyone for joining me. And I think this is a great solution. I think it really does fit the use case really tightly, and it's something which you can both start with really simple, with that nice basic solution that we ran through in the first week, but also quite quickly make it a lot more sophisticated and bring in a lot more elements to it as well. So hopefully it has something for everyone there. If you have any feedback, I'll be sending a follow-up email with a link to today's session, and I would love to hear your feedback. It really does help us improve these courses. So please take just a few seconds to fill that out. And of course, you're always welcome to join me for future sessions. And we have open consultations, we have other topics, and you always have access to 24/7 customer support. Just click on the question mark icon in the top right-hand corner. We are here to help you and your nonprofit every step of the way with your managing grants or something else. So thank you again, everyone, for joining, and looking forward to maybe working together again in the future. Bye-bye.